Basillo and Joe Rossinello. And once more, let us go into the breach. So, Joe, I mean, I, for the life of me, I don't understand why people, regular people, are buying into this call it environmentalist or climate change agenda, and they're allowing themselves to be bullied around by people like Kathy Hochul. All right. And yes, I know that's not the proper pronunciation of her name, but it's an ugly way of saying her name. And I just find her to be a disgusting person. So I call her Hochul because that's what she is. Um, but they want to ban gas stoves. I just don't get it. I really don't, because this obviously is going down. I really want you to talk about it. This is really going to affect, everyday people. But let's watch the clip. Let's see what's going on in New York State. Let's see how people are pushing back.
Tonight, a group of Western New Yorkers is speaking out against the state's push to exclude gas stoves and heating equipment from new buildings. A large crowd gathered at the Weber VFW post in Lackawanna for tonight's monthly 1791 Society meeting. Now, during her State of the State, Governor Kathy Hochul called on state legislators to require new buildings to have zero emissions and no gas stoves in homes by 2028, and to ban the sale of new gas-powered heating equipment by 2030. Some Western New Yorkers see this as a safety issue and a costly one.
I don't think it's going to be very affordable. You got houses that don't have up-to-date electrical services. Now they're going to have to update electrical services. A lot of this stuff's going to have to be done by a licensed electrician, especially in the city of Buffalo. And that's an issue. That's a concern. For me, it would be it's a big concern.
Kathy Hochul doesn't just get to do it by decree. She's going to have to put it in the budget or on the floor of the Senate and the Assembly, which means there will be a vote by people who represent you. And now is the time to let those folks know exactly how you feel.
Joe Rossinello, it's not going to matter one bit how the people of New York feel and how those representatives feel. New York is tilted way too much one way because all the power is concentrated in New York City, in those 5 boroughs. All those, the entire rest of the state is all red, with the exception of, let's say, a spot in Buffalo and a spot in Albany. The state's a red state. That's why at one point when they were talking about when the government a few years ago, the state government in New York was really coming down on fracking and everything else, those people along the northern border of Pennsylvania said, well, we don't want to belong to New York anymore because we don't have a voice. So that state representative or that gentleman, whoever he is, he's got the right idea, but he's wrong because all those representatives in Western New York are going to vote against this if they get a chance to vote. Again, Hochul is doing this by decree, which is another story. But it's not going to matter. New York politics is controlled by New York City. Having said that, Joe, you got to help me here because I don't see the average person. I don't see the average person going along with this. And yet I promise you, in New York, there will be a ban on gas stoves by 2030. No,
they're going to be forced to go along with it. That's
right.
The sad part. And again, what regular people have to understand, and that one gentleman said it perfectly, there are financial consequences to this. He mentioned Buffalo. You're going to have to upgrade your electrical grid in your house or wherever. Who's going to pay for that? Is the state of New York going to pay for that? You're going to pay for that. Let's, outside of the fact that gas stoves work better than electric stoves as far as just cooking, but they don't care about that either. Ultimately, this is part of a greater agenda. This is the green economic model that they are pushing. By the way, this is going to get pushed all across America. I'm going to tell you this right now. This is all part of that agenda that, by the way, every Western country has eaten up and is all on board. Joe Biden's on board with it.
Joe, what does that tell you about fear as a political weapon? Because that's all this is fear mongering. It's been our whole lives. They've been saying for decades the world's coming to an end. No, Al Gore said it, and then when the time, it's like the Protestant Christian who says, "I know when the world's going to end. It's going to end on August 23rd, 1986." Then August 23rd comes, and Jesus has not come back yet. And then August 27th goes, wait, my calculation was wrong. It's going to be July the 14th, 1994. And then 1994 comes, Jesus isn't back yet, and they just keep pushing it further out, assuring you that the end is going to come. Okay, and again, I'm being a little cheeky here, but they assure you the end is going to come. All right, but when it doesn't happen on their timetable, they just keep pushing the date further and further out. These people are the same thing. Al Gore, all the rest of them, all your globalists at the WEF, they're all doing the same thing. They've been saying for years, okay, years, too many people in the world. The Earth's not going to be able to sustain us. The environment, the global warming, then it's global cooling. Now it's climate change. They move all over the place. Joe, what's it going to take for everybody to understand that these people have an agenda and they're preying on your fears? And because of your fear, you're giving them all of your liberty. Am I wrong, Joe?
100%, Joe. Ultimately, it's like a crisis that allows these people to move things forward. I've learned that. And ultimately, I hate to say it, it'll be a crisis that moves them back. Until then, they're in control. They control all the centers of power.
Yeah.
It's scary. They control the universities. They control the media. They control Hollywood. They control the corporations. All the levels of power are controlled by them. All of them. It's getting to the point they don't even need the consent of the people.
Oh, that goes without question.
And that's what people have to understand. And this movement, what we're talking about right now, away from gas stoves, is part of a much bigger idea. Now, this is going to cost you money. That guy just said that.
Right.
And this is why I've said this time and time again, and I'm going to say it again. If you are in the middle class, you can't afford to support these people, economically speaking. We're seeing this in Canada. 1 in 4 people in a G7 nation are using food banks to supplement their families' eating.
Is that not a crisis?
Joe, but people are brainwashed. They belong to a political identity and they just compartmentalize those facts. They choose not to look at them.
Joe,
And
then
when-
in justice, they get what they deserve.
I
They-
get it.
I'm
but the
sorry,
sad
and I
part
know
is
that sounds
we
harsh.
No, but it's us too.
Oh,
You
no,
see,
no.
that's my frustration. I get sucked down the toilet because you refuse to listen to logic.
Do you know what
And
somebody
this-
said to me one time when I was talking to them? I was having a conversation, just a normal person, guy like us that I was friends with in New Jersey a few years ago. And we were talking about climate change. He generally speaking votes Republican, tends to be a little bit more conservative. He says, well, you know, I go to the Jersey Shore every year, and it does seem a lot hotter now than it was 20 years ago. I said, well, okay, that's a reason why we should just revamp the entire system, because you feel like sitting on a beach, it's a little warmer than it was 20 years ago. That's a real scientific way of judging whether or not all of this is crap. And to your point, by the way, that reminds me of the line from the movie Wall Street when Gordon Gekko says to Bud Fox, hey, buddy, you're not naive enough to think we're living in a democracy now, do you?
That's Joe. There it is. And I'm going to tell you something. People, you're dealing with the populace. First of all, they're not informed. Second of all, what they're informed is spoon-fed to them. They don't do the research. I mean, I was talking to a guy at work. He's a smart guy, too. I told him about what's going on with the farming communities in Europe. His mother's from Italy. He comes from a wealthy South American family. He didn't even know about it. He's like, I'm going to look that up. It's not put on the television.
No.
You mention ESG to people, environmental social governance. They don't even know what it is. You know
Right.
why? It's not talked about. And this is both conservative and liberal. The media spoon feeds you what you want to hear to further the power structure. The uniparty, both Republican and Democrat, that don't do a damn thing for people. This particular piece of information about the stoves, people could say, it's just a stove. Okay. What if your housing zoning area comes in and says you got to upgrade your whole electrical system and it's going to cost you $15,000? Do you have 15 grand?
Right.
You have 15 grand? Is the state of New York going to pay for that? What's going to happen to low income people? What's going to happen to middle class people? What's going to happen to you?
Right.
People don't think because
And then they
believe-
yell, and then and those who don't own homes, who rent, then they want to blast their landlord. It ain't your landlord that's raising your rent. It's the government putting more cost on the
100%.
landlord. And what do you think the landlord's going to do? He's going to pass the cost on to you.
Of course,
Don't blame
Joe,
him. Don't
Joe,
blame the
it-
landlord for
it-
that.
Joe, I bang my head against the wall. Like people, they don't think. They don't think. And frankly, they are spoon feeding you exactly what they want you to hear.
One thing I do want to say, respectfully correct you on, or disagree with you on. Conservative media, not represented by Fox News, does bring these things to light. If you watch OAN, if you watch Newsmax, if you watch Real America's Voice, if you watch the conservative podcasters out there, they are Tucker Carlson, okay, just having gotten the axe from Fox News. Fox News representing so-called the conservative media, I agree with you 1,000%. But there's a lot more outlets out there, all right? And the fact is, Americans need to support those outlets and spread that word so that that gentleman you spoke of that didn't even know that about Italy, well, now he would know it. If you're watching Steve Bannon, if you're watching Newsmax, if you're watching some of these others, okay, if you're in tune with the Blaze, again, this is all on really the political level, then guess what? You will be informed because there's nobody censoring them, because nobody can censor them. Joe, final word. We got to hop.
Ultimately, the green energy model is not for the middle class down to the working poor. You can't afford to support it. You simply can't. Even if it's part of your party's platform, you should speak out against it. Because I'm telling you this right now, it's going to cost you. It's already costing you, and it's just the beginning.
Absolutely. Thanks for tuning into the Front Line with Joe and Joe. Stay tuned for